president of the pond expert. He's been building ponds since he was how big?
Yeah, 10 was my first pond.
Okay. Are you sure it was a little bit before that? Or you just trying to be legal about it? So he grew up in the landscape industry. His passion in working in what niche he worked in was ponds. So he knows a lot about ponds. He might know too much about ponds. So you might be tainted with some ways to do things, but he's going to show you a lot of tips and tricks today. And he loves working with his customers. He's very passionate. He is the most passionate guy here when it comes to enthusiasm and energy. The guy's like an Energizer bunny. He gets out there and does anything for our customers. He's done holes for them on jobs to help them get out of the jam. He's helped them install something so we can show him how to install it. But he's really all about his customer and wants to take care of his customers. A little bit of personal stuff. He recently got engaged. Congratulations, Steve. And he loves playing video games. And so he's also he also is not ashamed if you call him a geek. So he's proud of that. When it comes to a broken computer or whatever, he's the guy who won't fix it. So everybody, welcome to me.
Thank you everyone for coming. Today we'll be going over water features from advanced to basics to pretty much everything you can imagine about it. My name's D. Campbell, also known as Dylan Campbell. I obligatory say, rest in peace, Luke Perry. I'm one of the few Minnesota Dylans named after Luke Perry in 90210 and not Bob Dylan. Now you know why he goes by D. I'm proud of that. So we're going to go through quite a few things. I've been in the industry 10 plus years legally. You know, I did my first pond at about 10, started cleaning ponds at about 12, just because I was a swamp kid and I was never scared of gross water. My dad gave me $5 an hour to jump in a gross pond. Pretty worth it. I've done hundreds of different builds across my career. As a company, we actually won 3 Hedberg Awards, 2 MNLA Awards, and was in Handy Magazine 3 times in total. Every picture supplied, other than a few stock photos on slide 6, are from projects that I have done. Feel free to ask any questions about it. Just one pre-qualified for it. I've done a lot of parade of ponds and little classes like this before. The question I always get, and the question that I won't be able to answer, is how big of a pump is in that pond? You get asked that all the time. It's really not a valid answer to give someone. I can tell you it's 10,000, but you don't know whether or not I have 50 feet of plumbing. You don't know how high the head height is, so really it's just kind of a useless answer. Pond industry, like Matt said, I've been in the industry for very long, have seen a lot of different techniques, and he is probably right that I know a little bit too much. So I will go through a few different ways of doing water features. By no means do I think one way is better than others. Landscaping, when it comes to ponds, is one of the few portions of landscaping that's very much an art form. How I do it and compared to how Jeff does it could be completely different, you know. We all just have our different approaches, so I'll try to cover all the different approaches and as unbiasedly as possible. So we'll just go through basic build calculation tips. So we'll start out with the more basic side, fountains. Basin fountains versus a liner fountain. Which one's better to do and why? A basin fountain. Pros to these are just your basic black plastic tub that you put a fountain on. Really easy to work with and everything. Pros for these is they're incredibly cheap. They're very easy to build. If it takes you more than 4 hours to build one, then you probably should try doing something else. These are very, very easy. And they're incredibly easy to haul too, which is nice. I have a Ford Fusion. I could build a fountain with this. I probably can't do a liner fountain with my Fusion. Cons, it's limited in options to put on it. What I mean by that is there's a weight limit to these. A 30-inch can only take about 500 pounds, while a 45 can take about 1,500 pounds. So meaning you have to factor in the weight of the bubbler on it, or the rock going on it and everything. And it's pretty easy to exceed 1,500 pounds actually. Limited in shaping, just because it's a perfect square, you can't really decide the shape for it, so you kind of have to know where you're going, and thus it's kind of limited in sculpting. And you have to remove the pump from it every single year, just because it's only about 12 inches submerged on general average. And you also hold limited amount of water. 27 gallons in a 30, well 45 gallons in a 90. Benefit though, that I should have said, the pros though, for the holding limited water, it's really easy to put an autofill in a basin. A liner fountains, it's a little bit more difficult to have an autofill. These, it's really easy. Basin fountain styles, just due to the weight restrictions and everything, basin fountains are usually more contemporary like this. Just more basic plastic features and everything. You can do some bubblers on it, but once again, you can really easily exceed 1,500 pounds with a bubbler pretty quick, you know. A 36-inch glacial fieldstone is easily about 1,200 under average, you know. So it does add up pretty quickly. For looking at the different basin styles out there. In Minnesota, we have two main basin styles that you can buy here. There's the Easy Pro brand, this one on the left here, and then the Aquascape brand here. So the Aquascape is the one on the right in that plastic tub in the picture. Personally, I will always go with Aquascape versus Easy Pro. I know that sounds biased because that's what I carry, but I'll just explain why I honestly have that opinion. So as you can see how their bases work, is it's a full grid system that you remove. So because of it's a grid system like this, it makes it really difficult to drill holes into it for resizing it for bigger size plumbing. Well, this, which is a solid plastic tub, incredibly easy to drill holes in it and have exit. It also is designed with using PVC across it, so because of that, the weight limit is very low on it. If you want to do a higher weight limit, then I didn't make up that picture, that's from their actual catalog. They tell you to put in concrete cinder blocks inside of it. So obviously putting concrete inside a water feature is going to affect the alkaline level significantly. So I really wouldn't recommend that one versus the Aquascape. Another reason why I don't really recommend it, looking at the 19 catalog for Easy Pro, I didn't see it in there, so I assume it's still the case. The grid is not available for individual samples. So if you lose it, if it breaks, you're kind of SOL, and you have to buy an entirely new one and replace it. Well, the Aquascape one, all you can really lose is that little tray piece in the corner there where you access the pump. Really easy to get another one. It's like 10 bucks, so not the end of the world when you lose one of that. So that's the Easy Pro basin versus the Aquascape. One benefit though for the Easy Pro, just out of all honesty, I like being honest with it, is they do come in larger sizing, which is kind of nice. It comes in a 40, a 48, and then I believe a 55 now, if I remember correctly. So that is a benefit to it. Well, the Aquascape is largest is a 45. But still, accounting for all of that, I'll still go with the Aquascape. If you're trying to expand on it to make it bigger, all you simply have to do is just submerge it a little bit further in the ground and then line around it. Just kind of like how you would have done a pond. It's a simple, easy way to get around it. Liner fountains. Liner fountains are probably my favorite just because they're more flexible in shaping and sizing. You can make a more elegant feature out of it if you want to. You can use any material in it, since you're not doing with weight restrictions or anything like that. You can put in whatever you want. And you can go 5 feet deep with it, allowing you to keep your pump in year round. So on the whole 5 feet deep, here you hear multiple different things. I've heard Aquascape and Easy Pro say 3, Aquapar says 4 feet. I'll always say 5 feet just because we live in Minnesota and all of us have seen 5 feet of ice before in our life. Yeah, granted, on average it'll be about 3 or 4 feet will be your frost ice level, but I always believe you're better on planning for the woods. Huge benefit of keeping it year round too is I know a lot of people, we actually personally still do that at hotel. You can keep it running year round, which gives you really awesome icicle formations and everything. You just run it for like the first month there until it starts sucking air and shut it off. You just have beautiful ice formation. It's just a really classy, elegant look. The more natural look, and you can also contain as much water as you desire. I'm not stuck with a 45-gallon basin. If I want to make a 1,000-gallon basin, I can easily do that, and that's a big benefit. Cons, it's a lot more expensive doing it this way. Liner by no means is cheap. Compared to a big plastic tub, it's a lot cheaper. The hauling side of things, that's what I meant with the whole fusion example. Liner adds up really quickly in weight, and obviously even a small 5x10 roll is usually very big unless you're buying the box variety, so it's going to be hard for you to shift that. Still though, I will always go with this option myself, but keep in mind it's more time consuming. Maybe give your customers 2 separate bids, you know, a bid with a basin and then a bid with how much it costs with a line variety. Because obviously the line variety is going to be more expensive. Do we have any questions so far about it? So liner fountain install, just technically install it. So All you do here is you simply shape out your hole and everything, dig it out as straight as you possibly can. And then what you're going to do is make one area at least 8 inches lower than the rest of the house. But this part here that you can see the person compacted for is where the boat's going to go. This is where the fountain pump is going to be stored. There's 2 reasons why you keep it lower like this. 1, you know water level will always be at the pump height. You won't have to deal with anything like that. And 2, how the bolts look, everyone's seen in my sewer, it's a little mesh in front of it. That way you're not stuck having debris going into it. You got another extra catch there, so they'll go in like this and you rock on top of it. So it just makes it a nice, safer way to do it. Keeps it nice and clean. After you have it all dug out, you'll then put in your liner and your aqua blocks if you're planning on using aqua blocks are these little black mesh things here, but therefore is storing extra water. Instead of wasting space on rocks, instead you can use these little water matrices as water. Just a warning right now, ponds have just hundreds of jargon. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to stick to the same words all throughout, but there's a lot of different terms between rain harvest, basin, ponds, there's a lot of different, all meaning the same thing. When you use these aqua blocks, it's very important to wrap them like a present with fabric because they have jagged little corners on them and people are going to be walking across it holding big heavy rocks. I have seen it many a times now where it punches a hole in the liner because of it. Be careful when you walk on it too. I know they're rated to take a lot of weight, but I've fallen through personally and watched a couple buddies fall through them. Just be smart, try to step in the middle and try to step on as many as possible. That way you don't fall. After you have it all wrapped with the aqua block, you'll then fill in the voids with big, large-sized boulders to fully lock in everything. The boulders will also act as a bacteria harboring a little bit more and that like that. So after you have that whole line rocked and locked in together, you'll then have the final image here where you just rock the rest of the top, giving you a nice, simple, easy to do procedure. So not too hard or anything doing the line. Pond bog system. So this is where I'm going to talk about the jargon here for a second. Some people call it a bog system, some people call it a rain harvest system, some people call it the basin system. I'll try to stick with bog system to the entire lecture so people know which one I'm talking about. Because upper basin, lower basin can mean something different later on. Pros to a bog system pond. It's a very natural filtration method. This is what you do if you're trying to make more of an ecosystem than trying to build a feature. You have very large water storage inside a bog system too, since this whole area is just going to be filled in with aqua blocks. You can keep the pump in year-round once again, which is a huge benefit. It's very easy to attach an overflow or a dry stream as well, meaning the same thing. I'll get into later on as well. Cons, it's more expensive doing the bog system method than it is doing a skimmer to biofilm. It's also far more time-consuming. There's a lot more digging going on. There's more fabric that goes inside of it. There's more water matrix. You still got the housing and everything. So it can be a lot more time consuming and more expensive in the long run. And the terrible 2s and 3s tend to be worse. What I mean by the terrible 2s and 3s is much like toddlers, ponds have their bad phase too. Usually around that 2 and 3 year mark, they can be very mucky, grimy and everything, while it's still kind of establishing itself. It's going to be constantly at war of too much fish, too much plants, too much bacteria, and it'll just go through this endless cycle until it usually eventually settles out around the 30-year mark, and you'll have a very pristine pond that's very much self-taking care of. So for the bog system, this rule applies for everywhere. You have to have 3 inches of river rock throughout your entire pond for good bacteria to live in. So how the bacteria work is there's beneficial bacteria that you put in your pond. What this guy's for is he eats the ammonia, the poop, and he eats the dead. That's what they're for, the stuff that makes your pond mucky and gross. The good bacteria is what we would call aerobic bacteria, meaning it needs oxygen to live. 3 inches of depth is as far as the oxygen level really is functional for the river rock, for the bacteria to live in. As soon as you exceed that 3 inches, now we're at the anaerobic bacteria, meaning a bacteria that doesn't need oxygen to live. These are your bad bacteria. If anyone's done any demolitions yet or anything, you get a really black, sludgy, mucky rock at the bottom. That's bad bacteria. You don't want black, sludgy rocks inside your pond or anything like that. For the basin, once when you're done building it, you'll then fill it up with big, porous rocks. You want it to be porous to give areas for the bacteria to live in. Again, they're aerobic bacteria, so they want to live on the surface of these boulders. So give them as much places as possible to live in, and you'll need plenty of plants and fish inside a box system pond. So the box system pond is more building an ecosystem, you've got to get it functioning. So I put a lot of plants at the bottom of the basin, just for natural filtration, and then the fish as well inside of it to help keep your pond clean and running. The bad bacteria, so that picture there is what I'm talking about. That's that same pond from the one that was originally there in Dayton Demolition. That black, mucky, ugly rock there, don't put that back in your pond. If you're doing a rebuild or a demolition, you can take it out and hose it down as best as you can to remove all that bad, mucky, gross bacteria in it. But usually it's actually cheaper just to buy new rock from Hedberg and just find a spot to bury that. That's always how we did it, unless someone had a very, very tight budget, then we had to. Oh, trust me, you don't want to do that. So now we'll get more into a large size bog. Most embarrassing picture of me could be how big I am. So this is a basin that we did at the Westwood Nature Center. It was a huge, huge pond. I don't know if anyone's been to that national park yet. If you haven't, really recommend you go to it. It's a great park. That pond took 40 aqua blocks to do it, just because of the pure mass of this thing. So what you do is you dig out your hole here as oversized as possible. I'll then start putting all the aqua blocks inside said hole, and then what I'm doing here is I'll pull the liner as tight as possible while a fellow coworker backfills the area with dirt. What we're doing is locking in the entire package. We don't want to keep those aqua blocks floating loose. When it's only like 2 high, it's fine, not that big a deal. But this is going in 6 blocks high, so you don't want all this looseness to it. So that's what you do, just to wrap it all together to keep everything tight and thus keep it from shifting under the weight of the rock and punching a hole in the liner. As soon as you build this, it's going to be really darn hard to find the hole after it's done. You got to make certain that it's done nice and right the first time. So that's that same pond finished here. So this is the lower basin, or the lower bog system here. After you have everything all blocked up, you then add the rock on top of it to act as the natural filtration method to keep things clean and pristine. As you can see, the very deep hole there with how high that is. So this is how your lower basin works. This is where you're going to house your pumps and everything like that, and all your filtration. And then it'll run all the way up to the top of the upper basin. These are 2 separate parts. So I'll get down here just to point out everything going on here. When you do an upper basin bog system, what you want to do is have your plumbing run into a culvert pipe or a water matrix or something along that line here. And then you'll have little slits in it for the water to perk out and rise in. What this is here for is to collect all the muck, the debris, and everything at the bottom that this pump is going to move out. So if you end up having a problem later on down the road, it's easier to clean this out. All I have to do is pop off the top there, drop in a discharge pump inside of it, pump out all that ugly muck, and you're done. This isn't something you have to do often, just that into that, if anyone's wondering. Maybe 5 to 10 years of a pond life you might have to pump that out. It's not a common thing or anything, but it's just better than if you just have the pipes inside of here. That's how the old way worked. You just wrap in the plumbing, cut slits in it, and bury it. It worked really well for a while there in the early development of the bog system, but then when 5 to 10 years came down the road, and you had to rip out the whole entire thing to clean it out, it wasn't necessary. This is the new way of how everyone does it. So as you can see, it's the same exact way as how the lower basin works and how a liner functions. You still put in the water matrix, you still line it up with boulders, you still add 3 inches of rim. It's always the same cycle, just different applications. Any questions on the bog system before I move on? Yeah, the upper lower box thing just for a really deep pond. You'll do both no matter what when you're doing a box system, a lower or a up. The lower is just where the pump's housed, while the up is where the water gets to. So you will always do it this way, other than when you get more complicated with the skimmer firewall. Converting an existing pond into a box system. Pondless systems have become very, very popular nowadays just because of low maintenance of it. There's not as much need for filtration of it. Some people argue that you don't even need any filtration at all in a pondless. I don't know. I decided on that argument. So all you have to do for converting a pond into a box system is pretty simple. You just pump out the entire thing. Once again, you put in the water matrices. Once again, you want to go with rock, grab your housing, you fill it up. So it's very easy. It's the exact same step, just there's one step in the middle where you pump it dry and you pull it. Same thing for this pond here, though, as you can see. Gross rock here, that is not the same rock from that picture. That rock got buried. Next, we'll get into skimmers and biofalls. Skimmer and biofalls have been how ponds have been done pretty much since the 90s. The box system I just showed you is more recent, last 15 years or so. It started becoming a more popular technique. Well, this is how things have been done for a long time. So that's a major pro for it. Since it's a common build, there's tons of educated material out there. Box system, there's really not a lot, to be honest. Most people who do the box system are very hush-hush about their secrets and everything and don't really like to show what they're doing. Maintenance needs are incredibly easy on them. It's easy to reach the pump and change it out. And if you want to add an autofill, it's very easy to hide an autofill in a skimmer. Hiding an autofill in the box system is nearly impossible. I mean, you can bury it, but it's going to eventually break with the weight of the rock on it. So you really can't do autofill in the box. Cons, it adds a point of failure. I'll get more into that point of failure here in just a second. They can collapse too, making it difficult to get to the pump. It has gotten a lot better now that they've changed to this kind of shape design here that you can see with the skimmer. So now it's more a structurally sound shape. In the old days, they were just perfect square, very light skimmers, and they collapsed incredibly easy. If you're doing an old build where you have to take one out, best technique I can tell you is you have to just dig it out. Trying to yank it out your own way is just not going to work well. The best way is just to dig it out. So this is the skimmer. So the point of failure, how a skimmer works here is we have a faceplate on the front here. This is where you're going to attach the liner to the skimmer. What you do is you pull up the liner on top of it. This is the debris basket that was moving if there was wondering why it was stuck together. So this here is a faceplate. You mount this, you take your liner, wrap it all up on here. Like in that picture there, that's my brother's doing there. You then attach this on it using silicone and bolts, screw it onto it. This is the point of failure that I spoke of. As long as you're aware of this problem, it's not actually a big con. Since this is using metal bolts for it, obviously metal corrodes and rusts. Because of that, about every 5 to 10 years, the metal's going to corrode, and then what will happen is your faceplate will lift off of it a little bit here, and now you have open air here for the liner. A bunch of water is going to fall in between the liner and the skimmer box, thus causing a major leak. So if you're ever going to do a repair where there's a skimmer on it, and you know the pond's more than 5 years old, check the faceplate first every single time. 90% of the time, if the faceplate is warped now, and all you have to do is, maybe you'll have to buy a new one. Usually you don't. You just usually have to re-bolt it on, and you're good to go. So as long as you're aware of that problem, it shouldn't be any issue. So how the skimmer works is we've got this nice tub here. We'll put the pump in the very bottom of it, running to these little points here. That's where you'll have the line going. If you're wondering why there's 2 ports on it, it's for 2 separate reasons. Reason 1, you want to do a multi-pump install. That would be the reason for having the second pump. Main, most common reason why they exist is most people use it as the overflow. Meaning when it rains a bunch, and you end up having water going everywhere. This way you can discharge it another way. Second option is people use it for an autofill as well. It's all up to you what you use it for. You can just choose not to use it at all as well too. It's completely a good option. Other negative to the skimmer biofall technique is they are a little bit harder to hide. Some people are better at it than me, admittedly. I've done a handful of skimmer biofall projects in my lifetime, so I've never found the greatest way to hide it. It's pretty obvious when you have this thing around it. Some people substitute that by using flagstone to cover it up. Good rule for the flagstone. You see a lot of people put a lot of flagstone in their pond. I would kind of suggest against that, except in one case. That's if you have a lot of flagstone around the feature. You'll see people put flagstone at the top of their waterfall to have that nice flat stream. It doesn't look great when there's only 2 flagstones in the entire backyard. That doesn't look natural. So if you want to go the flagstone route, make certain to have a flagstone patio nearby or flagstone trickle throughout the pond as well. Your goal is to make something natural, not a pool. There are ways to get around the waterfall. If we have enough time here at the end, I'll show a way of doing a waterfall to make it so you still get that flat flow. So that's how the skimmer works. Biofall, pretty much same thing, except this guy goes on the top of it. This is just where the pump will come in at the bottom here. The pump will come in at the bottom, and then we'll have 2 filter mats in here. So what it's doing is it's naturally perking the water up, getting filtered in, and then it'll pour out. You have this little debris basket for the top. This is for just putting rocks or boulders on it or something just to help hide the biofall a little easier. So that is the biofall. Same thing too, you unscrew these, attach it, you're done. Very easy to do it this way. Most common build style, this is what you usually see.
D,
Yeah,
when you have those filter mats in there, do you put something on top so they don't float out?
what's that?
Those filter
Oh,
mats in
yeah,
there, do you
yeah.
put something in there so they don't float out?
So not necessarily something to put on top of it, instead you actually have a spacer in between it for the mesh, but you reminded me of something else that I want to go through. Bioballs. Bioballs is the second part that you put inside a bioball. It goes in a mesh basket that you put on top of it. This is just the same thing as the boulders I was talking about. It just adds more surface area for the aerobic bacteria to live in. In the old days, the 90s, you'll see baskets with lava rock in it as well. This is just the more 2000s approach to the lava rock in a bag technique. By no means is the lava rock technique bad. If some people still want to use it, go ahead and use it. Just know if you're doing a lava rock approach, you got to change it yearly. And that bags in those ways will help keep it all inside of it.
The other thing is with the lava rock, please rinse it before you put it in your pond. Otherwise you're going to have red water. You got to rinse it very, very well.
So here's just more of an illustration of going through what I just explained and everything. So all it is simply, you have a skimmer at the bottom here with a plumbing line connected to it, wrapping all the way up to the top of the biofall and just giving you an endless cycle here of filtration. So that is a biofall filtration technique versus the fog. Prepping a waterfall. You're going to be doing a nice, big, lovely waterfall, especially if you're doing machine work like in this picture. I'll always tell you to do it this way. You don't necessarily have to if you're doing it by hand, because it can be more delicate by hand. Always put fabric at the bottom. When you're putting all these boulders down, you might lose a boulder while you're hovering it over. Everyone's lost a boulder and excavator before. It's very easy. What's going to end up happening if you end up losing it is it's going to run all the way down that liner, putting a big tear in it, setting you back days of work. At this point, that box system that you saw me standing in, proving how tall I was in, is already completely built. If that ended up collapsing, it sucked a lot. So just be smart about it. Make sure to put fabric on the bottom. Some people will always do fabric. I'm not against that if you're new. If you're newer at building it, do fabric underneath it every single time, just so you're safe and not worry about it. After you've done a few, like me, Jeff, and all the other guys out here who've done a bunch of them, I assume you're more than confident to do it without fabric. So here's the fun mathematical part. So I'm about to bore everyone on. We're going to start talking about the filtration rates of each style here. So biofall skim, the build cycle. What you want to do is you want to cycle the water at least every 2 hours in your pond if you're doing a biofall skimmer technique. Some people say an hour, some people say 2. Once again, this is just a whole rule of thumb between each individual person. A basic build, guess what I did last week? So if you're cycling every 2 hours, if I have a 20,000 gallon pond, I want to move at least 10,000 gallons per hour, just to keep it all filtering and cycling nice and clean. If I do the bog basin, rain harvest system, whatever the heck you want to call it, then you're looking at about every 5 hours. So this is if you want to have a really big reservoir, but you don't actually want to pump out that much water. And you're looking at about every 5 hours in each cycle. So I say 20,000 gallon pond, looking at why you move at least 4,000 gallons per hour. For the filter max, so these are the filter max. This is the one that goes in the skimmer box I was talking about before. Change the filter max in the skimmer at least every 1 to 2 years, and the biofall every 2 to 3 years. I say might as well be safe and just do them both at the same time every single time, maybe even year. They're not expensive at all, these filter mats. They're really cheap, really replaceable. So you might as well do it. Otherwise what's going to happen is you're just going to have a really bad time. Use aerators or fountains to keep water in the debris moving. So what the aerator helps do, if I'm having that pond that's at least 4 feet deep, I will always put an aerator at the bottom of it. Just it keeps the debris moving, keeps it at the surface, so that way it will flow to my bog and settle in the bog where I want it to settle. Versus settling in the pond, and then you end up having to drain the whole thing out. So always put an aerator. Last one here is the hardest to get your customers to understand. Don't feed your fish. Everyone wants to keep their fish and treat them like pets and feed them. Your fish are there to do a job. You didn't build a pond to have pets. You built a pond to create a self-sustaining ecosystem. If you're feeding your koi's not going to eat algae. Those pellets taste a lot better than algae, and now you have a food. And also with the food side of things too. If you are going to feed them, make certain to feed them very sprinkly and sparingly. Otherwise what happens is the food is going to soak. They won't eat it after it gets too soaked and waterlogged, and now you just added bad bacteria to your pond and more bugs. So don't feed your fish, have them do their job. On the fish side of things too, you want to have a balanced pond when it comes to fish. You don't want to have a pond that's just koi, and you don't want to have a pond that's just goldfish. All the koi is going to do is it's a sucker fish, so it's just going to suck the rocks and suck the algae. But it won't eat any of the surface creatures, which that's what the goldfish are there. So you kind of have to have that balance of carnivores and herbivores throughout your pond, so that way it stays balanced. And know what your system is capable of. That's where we're going to get very in depth here for what your system's capable of. A filtered skimmer. So in all these scenarios here, I'm using a 4x10 string for the mat, a very standard string size here. A 200 series. So how those numbers work for the skimmers, you'll catch this pretty quick. It just tells you the square footage that it can handle and what it can filter. So the skimmer is mostly for large debris and filtering the surface here. So 200 series can filter up to 200 square feet, and it can handle a max flow rate of 3,000 gallons per hour. So what that would mean then, for max pond size you could build with just a skimmer, you're looking at a 16 by 10 with the average depth of 5 feet would give you about a 6,000 gallon pond. You're still cycling it every 2 hours, so you're good to go on that. 400 series, 400 square feet, you're looking at a 20 by 17 and a half pond at 3 feet deep for the average depth. In a 1000 series, that's 1,000 square feet it's capable of, max flow rate of 10,000 gallons per hour, can filter a 30 by 32 pond at the average depth of 2.75 feet per hour. One thing to note for the 1000 series is 1000 series is actually not capable of housing a 10,000 gallon per hour pump or a 12 PM, which are the two pumps that aren't capable of pumping that much. So you do actually do the multi-pump installation that I talked about before. It's the only way that you can do that. And then here's a nice little side cut of what it looks like too. I think it's a better pic, that's why I didn't show it too much here. So all it is you have the pump at the bottom here, you have the the filter on top of it, just perking up all the water, and then you have a debris basket there. The debris basket is just quick, simple, remove it, clean it out, and you're done. doing a biofilm. It's again all with a 4x10, except in the first example. So a 1000 series is capable of filtering 1,000 gallons of water at a max flow rate of 3,000 gallons per hour it's capable of handling. So at 2 feet depth, we're looking at a 6.5 by 10 pond with a 5x4 string. 3 feet depth, a 5.25 by 8 and a 5x4 string. For the 2,500 series, 2,500 gallons it can filter, max flow rate of 5,000. Looking at all those measurements there and everything going up. Just wrap it up. You guys see it there. So what this means is if you want to do an individual setup, you can. If you want to do just a biofall, you can. Just know what it's capable of filtering. If you want to do just a skimmer, you can. The just a biofall approach isn't that common. I would say that just a biofall approach is good for maybe doing a pondless, it's just nice and simple. All you have to have is just more or less a Home Depot bucket at the bottom to house your pump in and bring it up. So just a skimmer is more a common approach just because a lot of people like these spillway diffusers. It's a really nice other option. Obviously, it doesn't give you any filtration or anything because it's pretty basic, but this is a lot easier to hide than a biofall just because it's so tiny. It's completely solid and secure, so you can completely bury it and everything, which is nice. And this would be another option for doing a skimmer to this. You see this a lot these days. It took a while to take off, but they're really cool, actually. Any questions about all that numbers? Did I confuse everyone here? Anyone have any questions? All right, let's keep going here. Guess what? There's more numbers. Calculations. So everyone has a cheat sheet in their book. We don't have to necessarily go through that or anything. Just something to keep with you guys for all the more commonly used formulas. Calculate the rock needed in your stream. Everything like that. A few of the more important ones I will quickly cover here. So good flow rate rules that I like a lot that Aquascape has recently started throwing out there more. I think people can comprehend this a lot better. For a foot waterfall, standard flow rate is 1,500 gallons per hour. If you want to really rip and tear, then we're looking at about 3,000 gallons per hour. I know just hearing a 10,000 gallon per hour pump really doesn't help give it to you in perspective. But if I do it by standard stream rates and everything, it's pretty easy to base it off of. If I know I want to do a 3-foot waterfall, and I know she wants slightly above standard, then I'll be looking at about 2,000 gallons per hour going through that waterfall. So pretty easy to calculate that. I'm looking for 6,000 gallons per hour for my pump to be. Most koi ponds with filter pad filtration, so just brushing over that again, every 2 hours you gotta cycle it. For the fountains, I recently started using this working at Hedberg here now. So I talked to a lot of people for just little bubblers. It seems to work a lot better now for me if I use a number that most people comprehend. So what I mean by that is the average shower head is 2.5 gallons per minute. Everyone knows what their shower flow rate is. Everyone can imagine what their shower head is. So you just equate that to gallons per hour. That's about 150 gallons per hour. You just use that number to help gauge how big of a bubbler they actually want. Everyone can comprehend that. Minimum gallons needed in basin. You want it to be the amount of water stored in your stream times 2. Reason why is the power will go out. It's just inevitable. When the power goes out, do you want your customer to have a really soggy backyard, or do you want it to all be stored fine? So what will happen is if you don't have the amount of storage needed for that stream, your pond shuts down, all that's overflowing everywhere. And that's not even the worst problem of it all overflowing out. What the worst problem is all the dirt that's going to go into it now. And once again, you just have a gross, disgusting pond and a really angry customer. Head pressure. This is the most important number that I assume everyone's been screaming at about for what your head pressure is. This decides what your pump is actually going to flow at, which we'll get more in depth here on the next slide about that. So what I mean by that, just a base level rundown, just because a pump is advertised as 10,000 gallons per hour does not mean it's moving 10,000 gallons per hour. That is just more or less the maximum efficiency of that pump if you're having it running at maximum capable standard, which very rarely are you ever going to be. This is where head pressure is important to calculate what your pump is actually running. So for every 10 feet of plumbing, factor in a 1 on top of that. For every foot of rise, add a 1 for that. Okay. And then liner needs really easy, length plus times 2 again. At the bottom right here, I have flow rate based off of plumbing pipes. Once again, you're going to see a lot of different numbers for here. I saw a number in Aquapar, number in Aquascape, and a number in Easy Pro. All three were different. So I just pulled numbers from my physics textbook. I just went to the fluid dynamics chapter. I trust my physics book a lot more than I trust the supplier. So this is the average flow rate based off of the diameter of a pipe. So what that means is a 1-inch pipe can only move so much volume of water at a time. You can attach a 10,000 gallon per hour pump to it, but by no means is it going to be capable of doing it. There's just limits just based off the laws of physics. So that's all your numbers and everything for that. So what this is important for is that scenario I just gave you here. I want to run a 7,000 gallon per hour pump, and I only have 2-inch pump. Am I going to be running 7,000? No, instead I'm going to be running at 4,000 gallons per hour, and thus putting a lot of wear and tear on my pump, aging it quicker, and yes, it does void your warranty too, as well as I find out that's what it was. Now we'll get into the total head count. Practice scenario. Mary wants a stream that's 3 feet wide, measure flow. So she's looking at about 4,500 gallons per hour. I have 35 feet of plumbing running from the basin to the top of the pump, and the elevation from the lower basin to the top of the next pump is 11 feet. My total head pressure is going to be 14 and a half. So then what you reference is this lovely little chart here for gallons per hour based off of head pressure. So I'll go to that 14 slot there and run down it until I find the spot that's close to what I want. The solution in this case would be a 5PL. I'm looking at about 3,500 gallons per hour is what it's going to be moving at that test. Well, at 12 p.m., I'll be looking at about 5,000 gallons per hour that I'll be moving at said head. So you see the charts are color-coded in a lighter green, a dark green, and then the yellow. The dark green is optimal function. This is going to top out a 10,000 gallon per hour pump. Will move 10,000 gallons per hour at its optimal rate. As soon as you're in the less optimal rate, it's going to be moving less than that, just based on the pressure of running through all that plunge. And then the yellow is just no-goes. That's just going to kill your pump. Yes, you can run your pump out there. Yes, it is going to work, but it's going to age it incredibly rapidly. It's going to break. It's going to die. And once again, you got to age it. So just be mindful of your total head height whenever you're building a pump. Any questions on this or anything? I know there's been a lot of numbers thrown around really quickly here. No? Alright, let's continue on. So, since I confused you a lot with all these different styles, now you have to ask yourself, which do I build? Here's just a few simple questions that you can ask yourself that makes it really easy to decide whether or not you should do the biopole skimmer technique or the box system talked about before. How much of your total water an hour can you move? So we're going back to that scenario. I have a 10,000 gallon pond, but I only want 2 feet wide streams in it with a normal flow rate of 3,000. If I'm using a skimmer technique, I'm going to be filtering the pond about every 3.33 hours, which isn't quite quick enough for a skimmer or a biopole. So in this case, I will go with the box. That way I'm properly filtering out here. How large of a pond? If I have over 1,500 gallon pond or a very high square foot, so like a 50 by 20 pond, something like that, and I'm not capable of doing multiple skimmers. You can do multiple skimmers just to match up your size, but let's just say you don't have the room to do 3 skimmers, or it's just not the look that you're looking for in the first place. There's just a lot more maintenance involved when you have 3 skimmers, and now you have 3 that you're constantly cleaning and dealing. I will go with the box system. How much plant life and fish life do I want? If the customer wants minimal to none, always do skimmer and biopole. The skimmer and biopole is more designed to be capable of doing that, while the box system is very much a box system just based off of having other life in it to help it. Without it, it's just not going to work. You can do a box system as just straight to a pondless, and you'll have no problem at all, but I would never do a bog pond with just nothing in it. It's just not going to work. Starting from a cave. So flagstone scenario that I was talking about, for hiding. People always have a hard time with hiding the entrance and making it look like an elegant, natural star. This is used on the picture on the right thing. So what we did for that is you put this inside of it and then completely bury the entire thing. And then put a little piece of flagstone around it, surrounded the entire area with flagstone to make it look more natural. And now it just looks like it came out of a cave and it's just bubbling out of the ground out of nowhere. More how a natural stream forms, you know, versus just an abrupt big waterfall pouring in. Always the other option is doing it more along this case. So how this one is built is we just more or less did a U-shaped wall all around the entire feature there, had it all lined in, and then put flagstone over the entire top of it. You can then bury that flagstone by putting fabric over the flagstone and burying it. So once again, you get a nice, elegant cave entrance. No one can actually see the true starting point of your feature, and thus it just gives you a very elegant, natural look. Centripetal pumps. Aquascape doesn't make a centripetal pump, but I can special order them for you, and they are still covering just so people know about them. A centripetal pump is a pump like in this picture here. This is a pump that sits outside of the feature. What cases would I want to use a centripetal pump? Exactly these two cases here, when I'm going from a natural pond to adding a waterfall on top of it. Doing a natural pond conversion, there's going to be a lot of muck inside of it and everything just because it's a natural pond. If I have a biofall in there, or a skimmer in there, or just a plain box system, it's going to get very mucky very quickly, and you'll be going there regularly to clean it up. So what you use a centripetal pump for, then you see it has two separate lines that run from it. The second line runs into the pond with a wire basket around it. So what that's for is you just drop it in the pond, sucks it all up, and then that way it catches all of the muck and debris. So all the customer has to do is every month or so, just for like the first year of the life of the pond, as it starts settling out and cleaning itself up, you just have to pull it up out of it, knock off the debris and muck, you're done, and you throw it back in. You get a lot longer life out of that versus putting in a submerged pump too. A submerged pump is just going to constantly get surrounded by mud. It will overheat and it will break. The con for these is they are pretty loud. Best way to hide the noise of it is either taking one of those fake rocks over it or just doing a plant berm around it. Just something to help reduce the noise. But they do make a fair amount of noise and that can be distracting from the natural contact. Also for the fake rocks and the fake rocks for the skimmer, just little random simple dumb pro tip for you. Rub dirt on it before you get it. Don't put it in the ground, elegant, nice and clean like that. Always it's just not going to match. At first, every time I do it, I find a nice gross patch of mud and just kind of rub the rock in it as much as possible, just to give it that natural stain and make it look more realistic. So obviously that doesn't look like a real rock right now. Boulder selection. In the pond industry, the boulder selection is much like the rule for masons when it comes to the mortar. It's the boulders that decide the look at the end, just like the mortar decides the look at the end of the bricks. Whether or not you want to go with large, big-sized boulders all throughout, or tiny 2 to 6s, is all up to you and your own preference on it. This, you're going to get more of a natural, rugged look to it, while this is more an elegant, contemporary garden approach. No way is better than the other one, just it's worth showing this to your customer just to see which one they truly want, you know? They can have an idea in their head, but they don't fully know what it's going to look like until they're done with it, you know? This way they get a good idea of what they're doing. There's nothing worse than building a water feature that takes 2 months to build this entire thing, and it turns out the customer isn't happy with it. That way you had a very clear plan from the start. You selected these size boulders, you wanted this. I'm sorry, I can tear it apart, but I'm going to have to add more labor to it. If you never had that conversation with them, then you may be stuck on the hook doing it yourself. So just make certain with ponds you have a very, very full plan just set out with the customer from the start. Boulder selection is more elaborate. Boulders to avoid in doing ponds. Basalt. This is a basalt pond here with taconite in it. It's a beautiful pond, I love it, but it's also my top 5 least favorite ponds. just because basalt is incredibly difficult of a rock to work with. Basalt is the rock that you'll deal with up north on the North Shore, you know, the red and white speck rocks that just hurt to walk on even barefooted, you know, that rock. Because it's so grippy and gritty to it, it does leave a lot of pinholes inside your liner. And pinholes are really not fun to find, you know. So I would just tell you, just don't do basalt until you've done hundreds of ponds before and you're confident enough to work with basalt. Then you can work with it. Otherwise, I would just tell you, just avoid it entirely. There's plenty of other cool red rocks that you can get with. Limestone changes the alkaline level of a pond, thus harming the plant life and fish life inside of it. You can use limestone if you're doing a pondless with no life in it. But if I'm putting any life at all in my pond, just don't do limestone. Maybe you're gonna have like 1 or 2 pieces, you know, just because the customer really wanted it. But don't build your entire wall with limestone. I only need to build 30% of the pond with limestone. It's a very, very tiny amount. It does affect that alkaline level really quickly, and thus giving you a non-balanced pond once again. You have a growth unit. Sandstone, it's made out of sand and it's stone, so obviously the water degrades it. I would avoid putting sandstone anywhere where there's major flows. It's obviously not in a waterfall, not lower in the stream. If you want to do it on the outer walls, I guess fully go ahead. That's what you want to do. But sandstone, I would just also avoid doing just because it can break down and thus changing the cloudiness of your water. Stream size. Stream sizing is important to once again go in and plan from the start. When using large rocks, it's advised to have at least a 3-foot wide stream. That way you've got a nice good look here, you know, versus 8 case. This case, that's what the customer wanted. They wanted a tight stream with a more badly brook to it. That's what they wanted. That's what they got in their set. Once again, it's important to show like this kind of imagery for them. They may think they want a really tight stream, but seeing it is completely different to what it actually looks like, you know. So once again, go with the plan from the start. Tearing apart a stream and a waterfall to widen it back up or tighten it back up is going to be a lot of work, lots of time lost for you, and obviously lots of money. So go in with a full plan when it comes to your spacing as well. Stuff the walls. There's one thing I want you guys to take from the class, it's stuffing the walls. For a living, mostly what I did after 09 crash, obviously it was hard to get fresh ponds and stuff. What we did for 90% of work is ripping apart and rebuilding really crappily done ponds that other people did. 90% of the time why their ponds were failing is they didn't stuff their walls. What stuffing their walls means is you're going to have only that cream bug. Sorry guys. There's a lot of voids and gaps between your boulder walls. What you need to do is you need to take river rock and jam it inside of it as deep as possible. Like really jam it in there. You're not just filling the void, you're making it tight and compact. This will do a few different purposes. A, it acts as a mortar to keep your wall locked in. B, it removes hiding spots for the fish. If you don't have all the voids, your customer's never going to see their fish, and thus they're going to think that their fish are dying and they're angry at you. No, your fish are hidden behind your wall. That's just where they all are. And it also reduces UV penetration. So this is what I mean on the rebuild side. A lot of people didn't stuff their walls, so either A, the entire wall collapsed and now they have a gross ugly pond, or B, sunlight was getting through those joints. And UV is not good at all for a liner. UV degrades the liner incredibly quickly. It gets really crisp, incredibly weak, and really easy to tear after the UV gets at it too much. So at that point, you kind of just have to toss the entire liner. And obviously the liner is very expensive at about, 80 cents a square foot. Adds up really quickly when you have to throw it away. That's how it's very well. Bonus for stuffing your walls, really easy to find agates while you're doing it. All of us who do it have very nice agate jars and agate collections. This is a good one. Who the hell doesn't like agate? Overflow in a dry stream. The overflow is very important in the box system in a skewer. The overflow is, as you see in this picture here, this is where the water is going to drain out when it gets too cold from that rainfall or the tower going out like previously. When doing a dry stream, I always say it's easier to fill up your pond until it's too full, and then find the point where it starts naturally flowing over already, and expand from that your dry stream. It's a lot easier to work with nature than it is to work against it. Otherwise, you might end up having to regrade an entire area just because you really want it in this one spot. Keep in mind, you're building a pond, you're making something natural, so let nature tell you how it wants to be shaped. After you dug this out, then all you have to do is just rock it with some river rocks. I don't have any picture of it, right? These are ugly, so I took a picture of one. So after this is all dug out, you just fill it up with river rock and you're done. Nice, easy way to get the water flow. You do want to rock it, because once again, it's about that whole dirt moving back in. If you don't have this rock and it's just a regular dry stream like how it is in that picture, obviously all that mud's going to eventually flow back into my pond and making it a gross, cloudy mess. Plumbing connection. Well, thing that of the plumbing that are important. First, we have a PVC coupler. This is your most important piece that you'll use for every single build, no matter what you do. PVC coupler is for mounting the plumbing, but the main purpose for the PVC is, let's say I have to run 75 feet of 3-inch to get to my plumbing line. Obviously, I'm going to have to connect a 50-foot with a 20-foot at some point. Use a PVC coupler for connecting. I know that seems obvious, but I've gone to tear-outs where they use the rubber coupler instead. Rubber coupler only for water, PVC for the ground. Since this has the bolts on it, once again, the dirt is going to eventually corrode the nuts will break, and thus you have a void between your pipe, and it becomes a huge mess incredibly quickly. When you have 5,000 gallons of water pumping underground, it all explodes out everywhere, makes a huge mess, changes the grade of their entire yard and everything. So this one will go as close to the pump, but after this piece, which this is, why can I not be the word? Okay, check valve. Sorry, I got to bring it front there. The check valve will be the part closest to the pump. So what a check valve is I don't know if you can hear it, but there's that little rattle going on. All what a check valve is inside here, there's a little flap that's set down right there. So what happens is when the water flows from underneath through the pump, the flap's going to lift up and allow the water to flow up to the rest of the pump. But if the power goes out, instead the weight of the water is going to push this flap down. So instead of having all the water in your plumbing flow back into your pond, it stays in the plumbing line, which is incredibly important. When you factor in, if you have 3-inch plumbing running for 70 feet, there's a lot more water in that plumbing than you're realizing. There's at least 500 gallons inside that plumbing line. If we didn't have that and the power shut off, all that water would flow back into my pond, all the water in the stream will flow back into my pond, and it adds up incredibly quickly, and once again, you have a big muddy mess. And you can see pretty much every scenario for the pond industry just ends with a big muddy mess. So just try to avoid having that happen. This one will go after the check valve. This is for disconnecting it every single year. All you're going to do is untighten these screws, pull up your pump. What's that? Yeah, if you need it, yeah. If you're going deep enough, then you don't have to pull it out every year, like Jeff's saying. But I will still tell you to always use this, even if you don't have to pull your pump every year, just because that pump will eventually fail in the pond. Whether or not it's 5 years or 10 years from now, it will eventually fail. Taking out a pump and replacing it is a heck of a lot easier when you have this. All I have to do is untighten this, pull out that pump, remove this, reattach it to the new pump, hook it back up, I'm done. If I had it all hooked up through PVC couplers, then I'm looking at cutting stuff out and having to buy new parts. You'd rather just buy a new pump if that's all you have to buy. Second is adjustable coupler, like the one in the bottom picture here. Some people like to use these more or less as a manual check valve. You can use it like that, and some people do use it to adjust the flow. Just know, yes, you can adjust the flow, but it does reduce the quality of the pump, and it does age your pump quicker. It's not recommended to do it, but I know a lot of people do it. I know I've done it before too, and haven't had any mistakes come from it. Just know it's something to do, but try to avoid it. That hasn't become as popular though, now that there are adjustable pumps. So what I mean by this is there's a 2,000 to 4,000 gallon per hour pump and a 4,000 to an 8,000. So there's really not as much of a need for that, but if you see an older pond with that there, just know that's probably the reason why it was there. It was just a way to regulate the flow. Reason why you put this after the check valve is very important. When you shut off your pond every single winter, you don't want that water to still be in that plumbing. In this case, you want the plumbing line to drain out all the water. Otherwise, what can end up happening is the water can freeze inside the plumbing line. Everyone knows that water expands quicker, has a bigger volume as ice than it does water, thus making your plumbing line burst. When a plumbing line bursts and you have to replace it, huge nightmare, really annoying project that no one wants to deal with. It's especially a huge disaster when the plumbing line finally bursts, because no one's going to know what happens until the spring that they turn it on. And more than likely, they're just going to turn it on and walk away. So maybe advise all your customers when you turn on your pump, just stay by your pond for at least 20 minutes or so to see if the plumbing line's going to burst. That way you can quickly react and unplug it. If it bursts and all's long gone, it's going to be really, really bad. Just something to watch out for. Yeah. Yeah.
If you use the aquascape check valve, like what you're grabbing onto, you don't have to put that also, because the bottom.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you don't need the current code to where it's elbows where you don't have it, like you can just put it there.
Jeff is right. That's a good point. Sorry about that. That's my bad. It's been a while since I've done a pond, and truth be told, I usually buy my check valves from Home Depot. I've never actually worked with an aquascape one. He is completely right. You can just unswivel here and drain it out there. So yeah, I guess you don't actually have to use that. On, yeah. What's that? If you use aquascape check valve, yes. Thanks for clarifying that. Good point. So use aquascape check valves. Don't be an idiot like me and only advertise a competitor. Liner options. We're going to get into different liners here, even though this probably doesn't affect anyone in this room here. It's still worth clarifying here. There's two major styles of liner that you'll find in this industry. You have PVC liner and you have rubber liner. Rubber is your standard liner, your EPDM that you're going to see everywhere. It's far more durable than any of the other liners. It also can handle negative 40 Celsius, which turns out to be negative 40 Fahrenheit, which is a fun quick fact for you, because they both agree with looking cold at that temperature. And there's more seating products out there to make it easier to work with. It can last forever if done right as well too. Cons, it's far heavier. Rubber liner is very, very heavy. It's a lot more expensive. And then this third one is the worst mistake ever that I've seen way too many times. People using roofing. There is a roofing rubber liner out there that I've seen people get tempted with all the time. Roofing rubber liner is about 30 to 35 cents a square foot versus rubber pond liner about 70 to 80 cents a square foot. So people will buy that thinking they got a lot of extra money in their pocket and they're making a great day. What you did is really, really bad. Roofing liner is not actually designed for life. It's not actually designed to constantly hold water. It's going to degrade inside of it, putting a bunch of bad chemicals in your pond, and it's just not a good time. So once again, I'll have to come out to that house that takes care of the entire pond. There's just no working with it. PVC liner, it's far cheaper. It's really easy to heat welded. So instead of doing seams with seam tape, instead it's welded using a welding gun. Cons, it's incredibly weak. Under 8 degrees Celsius or 45 degrees Fahrenheit, it gets incredibly brittle. I could pull on it hard enough and it's going to tear. And it doesn't overwinter. So when working with a PVC liner in this climate, you have to bury it at least a foot, and a foot with dirt. So you line it, bury it with dirt, and that's the PVC liner. PVC liner, this is why most people probably will never deal with it, but still recovery. What this is mostly for is for making like water reservoirs, like I see on the side of 90 Floridians. Those are using that. And then the second most common use is actually lake. But still, worth covering just in case anyone knows it. I know Jeff here did a PVC project before. Here, I'll have a little video here for you for the seam tape process. I was going to do it live, but it's quicker.
Seaming pond liner is simple and effective with the use of Aquascape's EPDM tape primer and seam tape. Ideally, seaming liner should be done in a controlled environment, such as a driveway or patio, but all too often it's necessary to seam inside the pond. To begin, set down a long, sturdy board across the pond surface to ensure a solid, flat foundation for seaming. Place one of the liner ends straight and flat across the board, removing any folds along the way. Place the other liner on top and overlap the two liners to be seamed by at least 8 inches. Fold back the overlap to expose the bottom liner and use a damp cloth to wipe down both surfaces to be seamed. Once the area is dry, shake up the tape primer for mixing and apply it generously to the seaming area. Use a clean cloth to spread the primer evenly over the liner surface and repeat the process for the back side of the overlapped liner. Apply the 3-inch double-sided seam tape to the liner starting at one end and working your way to the opposite end to ensure a watertight seal. Use your hand to apply pressure while laying down the tape to avoid imperfections such as wrinkles or air bubbles. Peel off the paper backing of the double-sided tape and begin the overlap seam by folding back the top liner. Firmly press down the liner on the tape and use your hand to secure the seam from one end to the other. Once the initial seam is completed, adjust the liner straight along the board to reveal the overlap and prepare this surface for a cover seam. Clean the overlap surfaces with a damp cloth and generously apply tape primer to the area, using a clean cloth to spread the primer evenly. Firmly apply the 6-inch cover tape from one side to the other, flattening the tape and peeling the backing along the way. To secure the seam, use your hands to iron out any wrinkles or air bubbles in the tape, and you're ready for water. For more information on Aquascape seaming products, please visit our website at www.aquascapeinc.com.
So that's the more modern way of doing a seam. I will explain the older fashioned way of doing it too, that a lot of people still do it to this day. Obviously it's how I still did it too. Other than if I'm seaming very large gaps, then I'll do the double-sided and cover tape approach. But how people used to do it the old-fashioned way, you still do the 2x4 running across it like you did there. And then you have your two liners run parallel with each other instead, keeping a little spacing in between it, and then you do just the cover tape. That was the one that you saw at the end there. Double-sided tape is actually pretty recent, like 10 years or so ago it came out. This is how everyone did it before the double-sided tape. I know some people still do it that way, some people don't like double-sided. So that is the other way to do it. If you watch a YouTube video and you see people doing it that way, just running parallel and cover tape, it's completely fine that way. I don't want you to think that they're going to get bad advice. There's both ways work. Some people just like it that way. Old preference, once again. The industry has a lot of preferences. Waterfall seam. If you can, try to keep your overlaps, meaning where two liners connect, at a waterfall. If you do it at a waterfall, then you actually don't have to do that seaming process that I just showed you there instead. Instead, what you'll have is your two liners flowing up the waterfall and butting over it. So that way there's no way for the water to ever flow behind the other liner, you know? It's just a good way of avoiding having to do a seam by just a simple little overlap on it. Picture here, just a little random note too. For waterfall lighting, always do uplighting. It just looks a lot classier like that uplighting, you know, gives you a nice, pristine look like that. Otherwise, if you go from the side of it, it's just not going to look like a lot. If you go at it from the front, then it's not going to look like much. Go from the bottom up. It always looks good. Importance of paths. It's very important to have clearly marked paths and trails all throughout your pond. That way there's safe paths for kids and pets to walk all around it. People will want to check out your pond. People will walk across the entire thing and want to explore. So give them path to do it. What I mean by this is just a little scenario of something that's happened to us before. Customer didn't want any paths or anything. They didn't want to be the image or anything of it. So we said, fine, we'll just do it that way for you. They had no kids, they had no pets, and they said that their kids never came over. So we're like, okay. I mean, like their nieces and nephews. Kids end up coming over, they don't inform us about this, and their pond suddenly has a really bad leak, just draining hundreds of gallons a day. And we couldn't figure out why. This pond was built like 6 months ago. There's no reason for it to be draining this much water. What happened is one of their little nieces and nephews was walking along the walls like they want to do, and wall collapses on them. Because it collapsed, homeowner decided to quickly rebuild it themselves. They didn't build it properly. The liner was 2 inches below the rest of the water line, and now water's constantly pouring down. It caused a huge nightmare for us trying to figure out where the heck this blowout is, why it's losing this much water, when it just turned out it was because what they said wasn't actually true, and there's going to be kids climbing all over their feature. So give them a path to climb over it. You also have to have bridge styles and everything to get around it too, which I'll go through a few of the different bridge techniques out there. You have a traditional wood bridge, everyone knows what that is. Very easy. Build it in your pole barn, you're done. Stepping stones. This is more your natural, elegant look. You just have some rocks sticking out of it dry like this here, trying to use as many flat pitched rocks as possible. That way you have a nice natural look here, and that way the customer can easily walk across using these stepping stones. My personal favorite way. Natural stone bridges. Natural stone bridges, or the Lion King bridge as I like to call it. This is probably my favorite. Really cool, sweet look like this. Just taking a huge chunk of flagstone or a huge step or something like that, and you put this bridge on it like this. Try to keep it flush with everything else around it. So how this picture works is we actually built the pond first and then the paver pad. It's a lot easier to line up the paver to the height of the bridge, and that's how you quickly do that. Gives you this nice, really cool look and everything, and everyone loves the Lion King. How you build this, I'll just show you a little picture of it. So this is my brother and then me inside the skid steer. It takes a lot of trust to do this from working with each other, but if you work together long enough, you trust each other. All you do is you take a big slab like this and chains wrap around it using my skid. Rich is giving me little hand gestures there to let me know how much more I need to pitch it in each direction. I will then slowly lower the slab. After we're comfortable with it on the wall, then Rich will detach the chains and I drive right out. That's how you build it. It's actually really easy. This is going from the side approach, so coming from the side of the feature. This one here was actually built from inside the pond. So how we do it from the inside instead is that same approach and technique. So instead we hold the liner, so it's only about 2 feet extra, and then place it exactly the same using the chain and such a rough technique. So you want to keep these natural stone bridges flush and flat if possible. Otherwise you'll end up with a look like this here, where you have a floating bridge. Floating bridges aren't necessarily desirable by any means, kind of gives you a big bump. What this scenario was, his customer wanted the stepping stone bridge approaches because they wanted a very natural pond. They ended up not liking the stepping stone approach and wanted to have a natural bridge added instead. What happened here is since the stream has already been built as a shallow stream, and you see here, it's not a very deep stream, it's only about this deep. There's no way of putting the bridge in flush because of that. You have to do a floating bridge in this case. This is why, once again, it's always important to have a clear plan from the start. What we have to do in this case, if they wanted a natural bridge and they wanted it flush, I would have to take a whole 200 feet of that stream and dig it down to get it to that height so I could. I mean, it's not bad, but it's just something to know, once again, on the importance of having a clear plan with your customer from the start. But like everything, you can break the rules. A natural stone bridge, 2 steps, this is where you don't necessarily want it flush. Instead, treat your bridge as if it's the first step. As you can see, we got a natural stone bridge here that moves up to step at that point on. That way it's a clean, continuous look to it. You can go flush with it as well, but this is the case where you say a floating bridge isn't okay.
So then you say stone.
Yep.
And then say like
Yep. part that everyone's terrified, water. Sorry guys, my protector decided I won't be sorry. Sorry about that. So water loss. Getting into water loss, how to understand your water loss, where it's coming from. Pretty much what 90% of everyone's calls are when it comes to maintenance. I just bought this house, my pond's losing water. Can you help me? We'll go through a little ways of finding those spots and how to properly take care of them. Loss in the stream. In my experience, at least 95 to 99% of the water loss is found in the stream. It's almost always in the stream. When you build a pond, we'll take this out two perspectives from finding one and a build set. When I build a pond, this is one that we built here, keep access liner on the outside of it until it's running at the very end here. As you see, we have all this liner here running, we fill it up, and then we turn it on and leave it running for at least a good hour. That way you feel the real steady flow and what the true nature of it. What I mean by the importance of it is if you look right here in the picture right there, you see that little spot there behind the rock? That's a blowout right there. And you see water is trickling right out of it. Granted, it's incredibly slow, but that is going to add up very, very quickly. And thus you're going to have a leak. So keep your pond running like this, so that way you can find all the leaks. Because there will be blowouts no matter what. There's just going to be, no one's immune to building a pond where there's just going to be spots where the liner crinkled up. So that's how you would find it. Afterwards, you finish out the area with a nice river rock edging on it. Common problem that I see for leaks is people will do these shallow streams like this and then edge it out with mulch. Putting mulch right to this rock line here, all that would be mulch will wick out water very quickly. It doesn't seem like much, but it does add up very quick. This little piece of mulch is going to grab the water to that piece, to that piece, to that piece, to that piece, and then suddenly all the mulch around your pond is soggy, soapy, wet, you know. That's going to happen very quickly. Very, very often, that is what the problem is. It's just too close a mulch sucking out the water. Second problem is there's going to be blowout points. What that means is areas where the liner might have dropped. Whether or not that's just from erosion or just from like this case here where the liner just happened to hold at that particular spot into that big heavy rock. So you just gotta look for those points. After a while you will develop an eye and you can just pretty much just spot it right away, like this is more than likely a problem. I'm gonna tear it apart and look. Two little tips for you for helping you develop the eye and finding the eye. 90% of the time, it's sadly the largest rock. It's usually behind the largest rock is where the liner sunk, because more than likely the person who originally built it placed it once and they were done with it and didn't want to touch it again. More than likely the liner sunk down there. Otherwise, another approach for finding it, kind of a weird survivalist technique, this is actually what you do in the desert as well, go barefoot. If you take off your shoes and walk around the pond, your feet actually have more receptors on the bottom of it than any other part of your body for detecting moisture, just for that old primitive case like that for finding water. It actually is pretty useful and it works pretty well. You're just barefoot, you're walking around, and you will actually feel a wet spot there. And you, oh, this is it. And that way you know within this 5-foot area here is probably where I'm losing my water. Sadly, I haven't found it in the stream. Where do I go to look for next? Splash outs. In this picture here, as you can see, when doing a large-scale waterfall, or any waterfall for that matter, have the walls extend out as far as possible. So what I mean by that is this is a 10-foot high waterfall here. So all this rock wall here extends out at a high height for at least 10 feet. And you see, we actually have a water line here along the rocks that you can see from the picture. But we just went 2 rocks less, we would have been having splash out. That doesn't sound like a lot, just a little water splashing out from the waterfall, but it adds up incredibly quick. In this scenario, let's say I'm just splashing out just 10 gallons of water now. Not a lot of water, obviously, 10 gallons. But that's going to add up incredibly quickly. I'll be looking at 1,680 gallons in 1 week time that I use. In this case, for this pond, which was a pretty larger scale one, about 20,000 gallon pond, that's losing 10% of the water weekly. So the waterfall can actually add up very quickly. So make certain to have high walls that extend out to match the height of the waterfall. Because the water's just going to fly everywhere. Just another very common, I would say streams are at least 90 to 95% of the leaks that I found. Waterfalls are the other 5%, and then you're in really bad luck if you're in these 2 categories. These 2 categories are like 0.5% of it. These are incredibly rare. Plumbing leaks. This is what I was talking about, like, let's say I didn't drain out my plumbing line, and now my plumbing line froze. It didn't break too bad, it just cracked a little bit, so now there's just water slowly dripping out of it. That's going to be your plumbing leak. That's 3-inch plumbing line here that you have buried ended up bursting. With this plumbing line, be mindful when you trench it for what's going over it. Another story of just a horror case that we've had come up before, customer said all they had was just a riding lock, and that's all they're going to use and everything like that. So we went about a foot deep with the 3-inch plumbing. Nice, deep, very low, more than fine for a riding mower. Next spring, we get a phone call from this customer. This is what I'm talking about, where you won't know what happened until they turn it on. Their pond and their backyard's completely flooded, the whole thing burst, and now there's a huge mess. We end up digging it out, and we find that our plumbing line that was dug nice flat with a good angle now has a big bow in it. What turns out happened is the customer drove on his backyard with his truck just to move some furniture to his backyard. I don't know why he didn't tell us that he drove through his yard, but that's what happened. So be mindful for trenching it for the weight that's going over it. And it's just a riding mower, a foot's fine. If you ever think that they're going to be driving a car or heavy equipment over there again, I would recommend 3 feet, just to make certain you don't have that bow happen. Finding the plumbing line. This is the very hard part when it comes to ponds. Since some of us have to do at least like 5 to 10 ponds a year, you're not going to memorize the routes that you went for every single pond. So 2 nice handful tips that I've learned. Place sentinel stones throughout the plumbing line every 10 feet or so. This is just nice, elegant marking stones that you put there so you remember the path of the plumbing. If I'm doing very extreme amount of plumbing, like that picture with that centripetal force pump, that project had about 250 feet of plumbing line to get all the way back up to the pond. What we did is we take metal washers, and you put the metal washers in it every couple of feet. So that way if I have a problem, all I have to do is go rent a metal detector for like $50, and I can really quickly mark out the entire line of the plumbing. It saves you a huge hassle. The first time you end up having a project where you're digging up the plumbing line and you don't remember where it is, you're going to thank me for that tip. Oh yeah, that works as well, yeah. So that way you can use that detector. Really worthwhile. So you do that too. See, this man has also had to dig a plumbing line before. Now he's learned how to do it better. Leaks in the pond, the final rarest of all rare cases. If you have a leak in the pond, these are the hardest ones to find, so we'll go through the steps on how to find a leak in a pond. Easiest way to start, because that's not what we're doing in this picture, but it's just a nice picture I had that demonstrated it, is you fill it up to each shelf height, starting from the lowest shelf first and marking on one of the boulders what the rough water height was on. So you have it sit there for about a week at the lowest tier. Let's say your water level doesn't drop any unusual amount. Now I know it's not in this shelf for the boulders. So I'll fill it up to the next shelf. And there's not any in that one, I'll fill it up to the next shelf. So let's say I finally found the shelf where it seems like my water is dropping. Where am I more likely to find the holes? Am I going to find the holes in the wall or on the floor? 90% of the time, it's going to be on the floor. In my entire career of building ponds, we put 2 tears now in the wall, and when it happened, it is incredibly loud. It's just rolling a boulder over and just a clip. There's just no mistaking. This pond here, as you see, it was built with only 36-inch size boulders, and since it was so deep, we had to roll the rocks just to get down to each tier. Rolling across the liner will leave little micro holes in it. So best way to find it when you're building it here is just unavoidable. You're going to put in little tiny holes in your pond if you're rolling big rocks on it. After I'm done with this, before river rocking this whole thing, have one of your employees take a hose and spray a hole at a 30 to 45 degree angle at higher pressure. What will happen is it'll catch on those little holes and you'll see a little ripple effect from it. So it actually makes it really easy to find those holes, and then it's just simply patching it in your thing. That's how you find it if you build this pond. If it's someone else's pond that was built that you're walking in on, and you sadly found that it's in one of those shelves, and it's a large scale pond like this, you kind of don't really have an option. I mean, your only option at that point is more or less tearing out the entire thing and starting over. The amount of time that's going to take to find a hole in someone else's build is going to be pretty much impossible. In my own build, when there's a hole in the floor, like I know just looking at this picture, just remembering this pond, we rolled in all the rocks from here. So this is going to be the area that I'm going to put all my focus in. If I didn't build this pond, this is a 200 by 300 pond, and let's say someone else here built it, I'm going to have no clue where to start to find it. It's going to take me multiple days of work just tearing apart areas, just hoping to find a pin. That's how you're going to find it in your build case. No, not really. I don't see it being that necessary. If you actually, okay, double line scenario, I have never done it, but I came across it once now, and it's the angriest I've ever been in any rebuild ever. We go to this couple's house and we rebuild their pond. They've already had 2 ponds there, and when we get there, the customer tells us, well, the previous builder told us we could only go 3 feet deep with the pond. So that's what we're stuck with. I would like to have a deeper pond, but they said we could only do 3 feet deep. We're like, what? No, we can go as deep as we want. They decided to go 8 feet. So we tear apart the first pond and everything, bid out this entire project, I get it torn down, and I cut a slit in the bottom liner to help drain out the very little bit of rock. It's not draining out, and I don't know why. I'm kind of worried what's happening. I finally stick my finger in between that hole, and lo and behold, I feel a second pond. What happened was the previous person built this pond on top of a pre-existing pond. Just to save them a lot of time and labor, they just lined directly over this other pond. So now I'm stuck doing a second demolition when I only did the project for 1 demolition. It was a huge nightmare, and what ends up happening when you have 2 separate liners, it's actually going to be worse than beneficial, is that there is a little slit in it. The water's going to get underneath it, and it's going to form bubbles. So I'll start this story about this pond here now instead of later. I'm very honest with some of the headaches that we've had and everything, so I'll be honest with this one. This was the biggest one we did. Like I said, it's like 300 by 200. Deepest point is 38 feet deep. So it's a huge, huge pond with high water table. We started this pond in the fall. because that's when you're going to want to start to do a pond where there's high water table. That way you don't have as much water flowing in from outer sources. And especially as you see, it's a really wooded yard as well here too. If you cut huge major roots on it, there's a lot of water that actually comes out of those roots. So far more than you actually realize or acknowledge. What happened with this pond, and that's what has actually happened in this picture, we built the first 18 feet down in one season, and then came back the next season just because that was the customer's budget and they wanted to do it basically. What ended up happening is all these trees we cleared from this area, all of that water drained underneath my liner now. And we ended up having huge water bubbles all throughout this pond. It was just a huge nightmare. So what we ended up having to do is add pressure relief valves, and I just had to swim down there and kept popping that pimple. It was like 3 days of work. There's like 2 pimples that developed. So it's just, you don't want water behind your liner. If you get water behind your liner, it's really, really, really bad. So no, you don't want to do a double liner. Yes.
Could you explain the concept after knowing what you know now, say,
knowing now, yes, and that's where I'm sharing this story here. Knowing now, I will never do that deep of a pond in multiple phases. I guess I would do that deep of a pond again in multiple phases, truly. But in this scenario, I wouldn't do it ever again in this wooded of an area. And what you can't see in this picture is directly on this other side of the street is a pond. Like a natural pond, natural lake. So the water table's already excessively high in this lot. So yeah, in this particular area, no, I would never do it in phases, ever again. That's a nightmare. I saw you had your hand up. What's that? I can talk more about it, yeah. You want to hear more about it? Yeah. So the pressure relief valve, what I'm talking about with that, I actually don't carry it up here. I think Home Depot's the only place that you'll find it. I've never seen them here or anything, but still worth notating. So what it is it's kind of the same as a pop-up emitter that you see for drain tiles, but instead it's for liners. So it's the same setup as, I'll show I using one of these houses. So it's exactly like this piece here that you use for connecting skimmer, but instead imagine this fully solid here, and there's a little white push-up on it. There's this little white pop-up on it. After you push it down, the water will pop, and then the water can flow out of it. So the thinking of it is in this 30 deep pond, obviously the pressure of the weight of 30 feet of water is pushing down with far more pressure than the water from underneath. So the weight of the water is going to push out all the mud and water underneath the water. And that's how you use one of those little pop-up emitters to make it burst out.
Dee, don't those work at, the water has to be a certain depth for enough weight for that to work, like 5 or 7 feet deep?
I don't know, I guess. I could see that being the case. Luckily, all of mine were at least under 20 feet, so I didn't have to deal with that problem. This is the only time I've ever had it happen, for having the liner get underneath the water. So, you've had it more than that, I think? Yeah, twice. 2 feet? So what did you have to do when it was just 2 feet then? Oh, that's what you meant by under. That's
Yeah, it was in the low spot and there's a lot of moisture coming down the drain and runoff the liner.
So that's how you deal with water loss and everything in the pond and line. Now finally, let's quantify our water loss. Let's say you haven't found any leaks yet. You checked all 3 of these bad spots and you still haven't found anything. What do you do? So quantify the loss. I could only find a measurement using pools, but the average size swimming pool loses 25 to 50,000 gallons of water a year. Obviously a pool is stagnant water, so it's no flow rate or anything like that making it lose it. That's purely evaporation and wind making it lose that much water. So it adds up incredibly quickly. I don't like basing the rules off of gallons lost based off of a number, but instead a percentage. Because I could have a pond where we're losing 500 gallons in a week, that's just a nightmare. Well, I have other ponds where like, you only lost 500 gallons, that's cool. No, that's good, you know? We just never know. It's all based on the pond. So I like to go off of percentages. If I'm losing 10 to 50% of my water a week in a medium pond, and it's a hot July summer, that's not a big deal. That's what you should expect. I mean, it's going to lose water with the evaporation, especially how humid Minnesota can get. It's going to lose a lot of water. It's when I'm at the point where it's over 25% and it's not the summer, it hasn't been windy, and it hasn't been hot, yeah, you have a really big problem. You're losing 25% of your water a week. That's bad. But just keep in mind what time of year it is, how big of a project it is, what's going on right now, and also these numbers could change too as well. Let's say I'm losing 10% a week, but I know it just poured 4 inches of rain. That's not good, obviously, as well. So just keep in mind the current climate and quantify it by the percentage. If I have a little 5x8 pond, yes, losing 10% of water is going to look a lot more detrimental. And that small of a pond losing 10%, we're talking about this solid foot drum, and they will notice it. It'll seem like it lost water. When really they didn't. It's just you have a pond with water. You lose it. Adding water back into your pond. So let's say you've lost more than 20% of your water into your pond. This is when you have to re-up your bacteria. So, we'll just go through a little bit here, talk about the time to go through a little bit. But just your more important ones here. We have beneficial bacteria. This is the number one most important bacteria that everyone has to have. Every customer, every time you sell a pond, give them this as well. They just have to have it. Whether or not they buy dry or wet is purely preference. Wet is just a little bit more convenient because it's 100 gallons for every pump. So it's really easy for people to count like this. Well, this guy here, you have to do the formula where it's just length times width times average depth times 7.48. That'll give you the gallons of water in your pond. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize that. Everything has it written right on in the formula. And that's it. The beneficial bacteria, this is that good aerobic bacteria that we talked about earlier. That'll eat the poop, the pee, the death. All the stuff that makes your pond grow. This is what you want this for. And then the next most important one is pond detoxifier that they should also have. Pond detoxifier, what this is for is since we put chlorine in their water in the cities and everything, if they're dealing with well water, then you don't have to use this item. But if you're dealing with a city property, always have them use the pond detoxifier. If you add more than 20% of the water back in, use this in it. What this is for is it removes the chlorine and the other chemicals found in city tap water that isn't good for your pond. It just keeps your pond from getting cloudy or musty or anything like that. If your pond does get cloudy or anything like that, that's what Rapid Clear is for. So pretty much this product here, the Rapid Clear, you more likely will never actually have to use it as long as your customer's regularly using the pond. Just something to keep it from getting cloudy. This is to deal with it when it becomes a problem. This is making it not be a problem. So just regularly use these two products, you will be fine. If I added more than 20% of my water to, double your dosage of beneficial bacteria for at least a month. So you're going to put this in weekly based off of the measurements required based off your pond. After you end up sucking out that much water, adding more chlorine, you just want to double it to restart the system. The chlorine more than likely has killed some of the good bacteria because they're very simple. Those are your important guys. Algicide, some people love it, some people hate it. I think it also just deals with a lot of fear behind the product because I know people have killed things with it, but it's just because they don't know unfortunate rule of algicide. Algicide, how this one works is it removes some of the oxygen inside your pond, thus making the algae die out. But your fish and plants need oxygen as well to live too. If it's an incredibly hot day out and it's 100 degrees out and you put this in, now you're just double lowering your oxygen. The heat lowers the oxygen level in your pond, the algicide lowers the oxygen level in your pond. And now you're more or less having your fish and plants suffocate. So as long as you're not using this when it's more than 90 degrees out, you will be fine. Other reason why some people don't like it is they want to just do just beneficial bacteria, and some people claim that algicide kills the beneficial. I didn't see any evidence of it, looking at both arguments of it, just out of respect to it, but worth addressing because that is the thing. Personally, I just like this one. As long as you have this one all the time, you're going to do a great good job. Sludge and sap are really good as well, but they're more also for the case of just not doing regular maintenance. If the customer doesn't change out their filter mat or doesn't clean out their mat, then you will have to use the sludge and filter cleaner. But as long as they're regularly cleaning it out and regularly using beneficial, you will be fine. Sap, as long as your customer's regularly raking out the leaves or any other organics are ending up in your pond, you probably don't have to use this one either. Truly, all what these are, it says it right on the package too, it's just a more refined dosage of this. So this beneficial bacteria just has a balanced amount of all the good bacteria for it. But like the sap just has the bacteria in it that are really good at eating this. This one has the bacteria that are really good at eating this. You know, it's just as simple as that. As long as you do the regimen well, you will be fine. Fountains kind of work the same way. As long as you're using the fountain maintenance regularly, this is just beneficial as well, and you will be good and fine. There's two other ones to go through this real quick here. Scale free. This is when you have the limestone or something covered up with just crunchiness. If you want to see what scale looks like when you leave, just look at the right in the little bubbler display we have there. That limestone with the white chalkiness on it, that's scale. So how you remove that is pumping this stuff in it. It will very slowly eat it away. Best way that I've experienced for removing the scale when it gets really bad is instead pour this in a separate bucket of water and take a wire brush and a lot of help. You'll be able to rub it right off. Foam, it's the same thing. You put in too much city water in it, now you have foam. You just put that in and you remove it. So what a pond should look like. I think this is an important picture and something to cover. If your customer is going to get a pond because he wants crystal clear water and just a vibrant feature, tell him he wants a pool. Like you're just not going to get that with a pond. If you want a pond, green little hue like this is absolutely perfect. This is what a balanced, healthy system looks like. This is about an 8-year-old pond. So it's just looking great. This is what you want. There's a lot of life in it. There's a lot of nutrition in it. Things are thriving. Just have your customer be aware that this is what they're actually going to get. I mean, you can use blue tint and everything to make it look bluer and everything, but if you did a pond because you wanted to replicate nature. That's what a pond's for. A pond is putting nature in your backyard. So make it look like nature, not like a reducing bad blooms. Use an aerator. Even if there's not fish inside your pond, an aerator is still very helpful just to keep the water constantly cycling and keeping things from settling out. The aerator is very helpful for that. Beneficial bacteria, once again, incredibly important. Have a balanced fish and plant life throughout. You can't have too many fish, you can't have too many plants, you want to keep it as good as possible. Clean, yes.
Those big rocks sticking up here, where you see the water, you have small stones below that water.
Yeah.
Spots with water.
That's river rock here. Yeah.
Pretty much like river rock on the whole bottom.
Well, this is, you remember that picture that I showed you of the box? This is actually about 6 feet deep. This is just the top dressing that you see. So this is what the bottom looks like finished after planting it. So this is actually more like 6 feet.
So you're telling me those rocks will be separate rocks?
Yep. But this one actually isn't even with the boxes. This pond is well like 15 years old, I think is when we did this one. So at that point, aqua blocks weren't even around yet. So this is all glacial field still. So this is actually like 6 feet deep, which is 30 by 36.
So you just stack rocks on top of each other?
Yep. And then you just fill it in with river rock. It's as easy as that. That's why I kind of like this way more than the skimmer and biofall way. So that anyone can dig a hole, anyone can fill a hole up with rock. It's pretty easy. Clean your new plants before you put them in. A lot of people I've seen where they'll just take it right out of the pot and put it straight in. There's a lot of nutrition, fertilizers, everything like that included with your plant. So whenever I'm doing plant tours, always have a wheelbarrow filled up with water separate that you'll dip each plant in to break off as much dirt and muck as possible, and then you'll plant it. Keep in mind with your plants what kind of plant you're dealing with as well. In the aqua plant industry, sadly most of the plants that people like are actually considered invasive species. So what I mean by that is they spread incredibly quickly. So be mindful with that when you're planting. Your customer may want lily pads, but do they actually want their entire pond to be? When I'm putting lily pads in the pond, I'll almost always do it in the pot. Otherwise, lilies will take over the entire pond within 5 years. It's a very awesome species that spreads incredibly quickly. Same thing with water hyacinth. That's a beautiful floating one. Keep them trimmed down, otherwise it will take over your entire pond. Yep, that's just buried in all the river. Yep, hold that. Acknowledge how old your pond is. If you have questions, sorry.
Well, sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing because of that, but you said that pond is 6 feet deep. What are those rocks sitting on? The boulders?
This is other boulders.
It's just piled up boulders going up to the surface?
Yep.
You,
just so it stores enough water. You need it to store enough water. You also need an area for the bacteria to live in, and just an area for things to settle out. So there's multitude of things.
No, but it's like 15 years old. You put you fill it up with water and then
You
go in
could.
there.
You could
after
actually.
the
That one
it's
picture I
going
showed
to
earlier, the
really
upper was about 2.5
right, and
feet
this
deep.
is
It all
before
depends on
you
the
have those.
case,
I
you
think
know.
it's a big
These
area,
days,
you know,
here,
big
like I was
40
saying, there were no aqua blocks yet. So I really
piled up.
needed to make it
Piled up, yeah.
substantially bigger.
Like, did you pile all that those rocks up prior to putting the water
So
in
yeah,
there?
these
Like,
days, and that
you
one
think
that
it would
you
be
saw with the
easier,
aqua
like,
block,
put the
yeah, that was
water in there if it's only 6
about
feet, and then it could minimize the slippery area. You can't,
This one
I
just
don't know, I think you have to get your
Timer
machine and
difference.
remove a lot of that stuff
Timer
before you get the
difference.
water in there.
No, you don't set online. You remember, so what I said earlier is you put it on fast. So you do fabric, you do liner, well actually, okay, we'll go fully. You do fabric, liner, fabric, aqua blocks, line the aqua block with boulders, and then rock it the rest of it. They're rated for a lot, they're rated for like 6,000 PSI.
Probably like a shovel, you just stick it out for water, like just
What we usually did too with new guys
boulders,
to make them more comfortable with rubber liner, just to know how
with
strong it was.
you can use
Because
that
everyone's
and see the
terrified
help
of
you
breaking
because
that liner.
a little bit,
First
but
step,
you ain't
I take a scrap piece of liner, put it
Yeah,
down,
yeah,
have them stand on a shovel and stomp on that thing as hard as they can until they break it. More often than not, they'll get so frustrated and just walk away from it. The really stubborn guy will pound on it for 5 minutes. It actually takes a lot to find it. Yeah. Yes.
What are your favorite like plants to use that don't spread too much?
Oh gosh, the plant question, the one I'm scared of the most. Don't know plants well.
down there.
So can you hear what he's saying?
No, I
No,
don't
we can't.
Marsh marigolds are great springtime cleaners. Pickerel rush, horsetail, irises. They'll take off, but they're a lot more contained than some of the other ones. And then Asperida after that. As you start the marsh betony, I avoid at all costs. Like you said, the hyacinths will take over, but they're easy to throw away.
They're just popcorn. Lily pads.
The cattails, make sure you get a dwarf cattail because they're a lot easier to control. Some people say they grow through the liner. I haven't seen that yet, but they, I think when they go through the liners, when you're trying to get them out, you cut the liner and then they blame it on the cattails. But stick with the dwarf ones; they don't spread as fast.
So the marsh marigold
Yep.
and rush
Prickle Rush, Horsetail.
Horsetail. Bog bean was one. Okay.
Oh yeah, yep. And that's what I mean by the balanced fish and plant life. That's what I was talking about with the terrible twos and the terrible threes. Because your fish are going to grow a lot quicker and reproduce a lot quicker than plants for the first 1 to 2 years. They're going to be the majority of the ponds, the majority of the lake where the plants are established. On that third year, the plants now have really good root systems and they start expanding. So now at that third year mark, now you have too much plant versus the amount of fish and bacteria eating at it. And that's usually after the third year that you kind of trim things back a little bit, and then it's from that point on that things kind of runs smooth. So that's that same thing that I showed you earlier for what a pond should look like. This is that same pond. It's at least 10 years old in this picture. It's pretty clear, you know, it's pretty clear. It's taking care of itself. Now I don't know plants well. I just call that guy Arrowhead. That's what it looks like to me. Is that actually what it is, Arrowhead? Yeah, that's the one that I usually use. Just because Arrowhead, it's calm. A lot of plants just get really busy. They're just too colorful, you know, and it just doesn't match the feel of it. That's usually what I dealt with.
So you're building all your ponds to stay water in the winter?
Yes. Yeah.
That's
That's
the reason for that?
the reason for the depth, and that's the main reason why I kind of done a lot of skimmers and biofalls myself, since there's two different styles of company approaches that you guys can go on if you're trying to become a pond person. You can just be like a weaver and almost just strictly new installs and very sparing amount of maintenance to get it to work, or you can do the more approach of strictly maintenance with some new builds in between. Both work really well, both are good approaches. The maintaining technique, your overhead costs are a lot smaller, it's easier to bid, it's easier to be profitable, and you don't have as big of a chance of losing your butt on a project, you know? So it all depends on the approach. We were just very much of the thinking of, if I never hear from this person again in 5 years, that's good, you know? That was kind of our goal and our mentality. I didn't want to have to come there every single spring to put their pump in, and every fall to take it out. I'm also not a big believer of pumping a pond dry to clean it out. You can pump a pond dry to clean it out once when it's just gone too bad. When it's just really bad, really green, really gross, you're kind of at the point now where you have no other choice but to pump it out, clear it out, and start over. But my pond looked like this, maybe a little bit greener. I would never pump it dry to clean it. What ends up happening when you pump it dry to clean it is not only did you kill all the bad bacteria, but now you kill all your good bacteria, and now you're starting the cycle all over again. And you just don't want to have to start that cycle every year, every couple of years. So it's just all about that, you know.
And when you say depth in Minnesota for the winter,
They say 3 feet to 4 feet is what most folks actually say. 2? Where do you see 2? Really? Wow. I don't know. Some people say 2, then some say 3, some say 4. I'm a 5 guy. Just better safe than sorry. I have seen 3 before, like easily 3-foot frost lines. It can happen. So I don't know. It's all up to personal preference. Yeah, waterfall foam. This is the one that I see the most that rookies tend to do. I don't really have any good pictures of it other than this one because no one likes to take pictures of a disaster zone. Waterfall foam is not waterproof. I've seen so many people come to this place even doing one water feature and grabbing 20 cans of foam. That's just stupid. More than 5 is probably stupid too, actually. Like, you gotta keep that foam down. A lot of people treat it as if it's waterproof too, but you have to remember, it's only water retardant. It just makes the water want to move over it, but it won't keep it. So what happened for this one is customer moved into this house, they're losing water every single day and they don't know why. I come in and take a peek at it. What happened is this line is actually completely flat here, and they just did a line of rocks along it and beaded the whole thing, which is a bunch of foam. Just ugly, terrible project. And I've sadly seen it hundreds of times actually. Foam is not waterproof, it's water retardant. And if you do too much foam, we're back to the wicking scenario that we're talking about with foam. Because the foam will wick that water right out as well.
What is it, foam? Technically, a bridge is not
What do you mean?
foam bridge.
No, the foam is just something that you spray in between the joints and then you fill it with rock. So that's what the foam's for, just to keep it going. Concrete ponds, I don't think anyone's doing it, but still we're saying don't do them. Concrete ponds are terrible, especially for this climate. They age incredibly quickly. If anyone asks you to come out there to patch their concrete pond, tell them too bad. No, I will rebuild it, I will tear it apart. This is actually that same basalt pond that you saw earlier there. Because it's going to have cracks in it, and when you fix it, it's a very superficial fix. So just rip it out, start all over every single time with the concrete pond.
Put, make a hole and then just fill it with mud.
What time am I at? Do I have enough time for this one? Let's skip this one here.
What we could do is have them go eat and we could answer questions too. The food is ready.
The food is ready. I think I only have one. Yeah, I just have two. I'll just skip that one. So I'll just go real quick here. No exposed liner, like I was talking about before. The UV will ruin and degrade a liner here. As you can see, this person thought it looked beautiful just to do a rock ring around it. This whole entire pond is now cracked, useless, terrible rubber liner. So I had to rebuild the entire thing. And I don't know who would think this. And then finally, aerators. Aerators, when you fill up your aerator, anything under 2, 3, 4 feet, just every time I say, just do an aerator. What you're going to want to do is just dig a separate little hole at the bottom, just about 6 inches lower. You put your aerator in it, put rib rock over it. That way, the weight of the bubbles won't eventually make it rise. And always put this in, even if they don't plan on having fish or plants or anything like that at the moment. Not only just for the cycling of debris, but just for future expansion purposes. Just because Mary doesn't want to fish now doesn't mean she doesn't want him tomorrow. It doesn't mean you have to come out there and rebuild the whole pond and put in an aerator. And that is pretty much it, unless anyone has any other questions or anything.